Good evening once again, friends and frenemies, and I'm sure even some enemies are listening. And welcome once again to the Leo and Larry Show, the show that tells you the things you need to know and the places you need to go. And as usual, we have some amazing guests, and this time it's the brothers' turn. So we have three amazing guests talking about a crucial issue. All our issues are crucial, but this one, we need for you guys to put on your sneakers, your walking shoes. We need to get active because the time to move is this week. And so, without any further ado, I want to introduce three gentlemen, and I don't want to take up a lot of time, so I'm going to ask them each to introduce themselves, talk about their organization, how they got involved with their work. And so they can do that in this order. We have Michael Coleman on, Paul Black, and once again, Xavier Boatright. So, Michael, why don't you kick us off and we can talk about your background a little bit and then jump really hard into the discussion for this evening. Welcome, guests. Welcome, gents.
Thank you, Reverend Woodbury. Yes, my name is Michael Coleman. I serve as the energy advocate for Upstate Forever, and we are a nonprofit conservation organization that focuses on clean energy and clean water in the 10-county upstate region of South Carolina. A little bit about how I got involved. I've always been interested in helping communities and individuals navigate government bureaucracy. And so, using my background in public policy and legal analysis, I saw an opportunity to make a difference in the energy space and learn energy policy. And that's when I joined Upstate Forever. So thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you for joining us. Paul Black.
Uh, Thanks, Rev. My name is, I mentioned Paul Black, and I am the field organizer for South Carolina with the Sierra Club. And the Sierra Club is the nation's oldest environmental advocacy organization. I like to say whenever there's a discussion about the environment in politics, the Sierra Club is involved and somewhere in the mix. So I have been working in the environmental field for about 6, 7 years now. I got into this work from my time working in politics and in the government communities. And being representing the public with the South Carolina state government. But I don't want to take up too much time. I just want to thank you for inviting me on today.
Okay, thank you for coming on. And Xavier Boatright.
Hello, everyone. I'm Xavier Boatright. I am the Deputy Legislative Director of Clean Energy for Sierra Club, Manning native, and all glad to be here today. As far as I think my wonderful esteemed colleagues have started us off well, and my colleague Paul Black gave some background about the Sierra Club. As far as my career, this start environmental justice organizing and working in this sector work started for me in 2023, really. So I'm going into this will be my 11th year. It's been over a decade of campaigns and successful work in this space, and glad to be here to talk to you all today, nonetheless, about energy and the future of South Carolina's energy sector, and and keeping a community-based perspective as we plan for the future of South Carolina's energy sector.
Okay, so this is going to be a freewheeling discussion, guys, just like we're just sitting around hanging out. So, Michael, why don't you kick us off and tell us, because something really important is happening this Tuesday, and we need for everyone in our listening audience to be educated and aware of what's going on. And even more than that, they need to take action on Tuesday. So why don't you kick us off, Michael, and then you guys just let's just talk, okay?
Yes, sir. So, for those who do not know, there's a big discussion around the energy future of South Carolina and how South Carolina will meet its energy demand. So, there's been some legislation proposed at the State House called the South Carolina 10-Year Energy Transformation Act. And most of what you need to know about that legislation is that it does have several concerns. Um, as far as rolling back environmental permitting, that would allow joint major facilities to pretty much go ahead and build their facilities that include gas plants, pipelines, before receiving PSC approval. So essentially, when a utility um, puts forth their integrated resource plan or their plan of how they're going to generate electricity for the next 15 years. If they have a gas plant that is already identified to be built in that IRP, according to this legislation, they would not need to do any more they could sidestep that permitting process and go ahead and begin construction as long as that IRP has already been approved. So that's one of the major concerns in the legislation. And so sidestepping that permitting process that allows for ensuring that projects are reasonable and that they avoid environmental implications, of course, as we can talk about, would incubate all other types of instances of energy justice violations. So essentially what's going to be happening on this Tuesday is there's going to be a hearing held before the House uh, Labor, Commerce, and Industry subcommittee around some of the concerns in this bill. And we're needing everybody to come out to basically show your opposition and identify some of the ways that this bill would negatively impact ratepayers. And so I would kind of leave it to some of my other colleagues, Paul and Xavier, to jump in and kind of talk more about this bill. And also, this bill would also authorize a massive gas plant to be built, which is known as the Kennedy's plant. And that's, I think, between Walterboro and St. George. And an independent study of the PSC has already determined that this uh, plant could be smaller and it could incorporate more solar and battery storage to meet the demand that South Carolina is seeing from the surging economic and population growth.
Okay, let me jump in really quickly for some of our audience who may not know what the PSC is, Public Service Commission. And you also mentioned that our energy needs are changing and people see that we're building solar in the state. We have battery plants being built so that we can have electric vehicles, and now gasification plants. Why is that bad, gentlemen? Why is it seems like you're saying that going in the opposite direction, and why are we skipping the permitting process? And what does the permitting process do, Michael? Thanks for opening this up, but I just know we have some people in the audience who may not be familiar with some of this stuff. We're used to using acronyms and letters. So, Public Service Commission, either one of you guys, why is this like taking us backwards or harmful?
Sure, I don't mind jumping in here if that's all right. The Public Service Commission here in South Carolina is the body that regulates, among a lot of other things, the utilities in our state, the for-profit utilities and Santee Cooper. Because these utilities have essentially a state granted monopoly on like all power generation and transmission, they're supposed to be regulated by a state agency. That was essentially the trade-off that happened when they were given the ability to basically have these massive service areas. And they're a for-profit company. Duke and Dominion, Fortune 500 companies. And you don't want to give a for-profit company that you don't have a choice on who you work with I mean, because you can't, like, you can choose your cell phone provider, you can choose your doctor, you can choose what store you go to, but you can't choose where you get your power from. Not here in South Carolina. So a regulatory body like the Public Service Commission is supposed to be there in the mix to look out for the best interests of South Carolinians. And when we start talking about removing regulation and being able to shortcut the permit process, it it defeats the whole entire point of there being these regulators. As like, you can't regulate if you don't even have to go in front of the regulators, like, in short. So that's like, we've mentioned the PSC a lot in the energy work, but that's because there's supposed to be an important check on essentially utility greed. Like, we're like, some folks always say, like, I'm a customer of this utility, I'm a customer of that utility, but the more correct term is I'm a ratepayer. And the folks that are actually being serviced by, utilities are their shareholders for the most part. And their goal is, of course, to derive as much profit, as much, sorry, not process, as much, what's the term? Profit, my apologies, as much profit as possible for their shareholders. And the PSC is supposed to be, and the state regulators are supposed to be in the way to make sure that while energy is generated, it is something that is good for South Carolina and for the companies that are in the state. So we do need energy in South Carolina. We can't say that, but we need to make sure that this growth is responsible and isn't just repeating the mistakes of the past, like the entire VC summer debacle that happened in living memory. Like, it was hadn't even been 10 years. Has it been 8 years yet? But but yeah, there's a lot of mistakes that we've made in the past with energy here in South Carolina, and we're paying for them, literally. Like,
Yeah,
we're
yeah. Go ahead, Paul. Go ahead.
oh,
Because VC somehow just was gonna say was just it made people's electric bills just go through the ceiling, and so that's why we need regulators, and that's one of the things they're afraid of, right, Paul? That people's bills are gonna go crazy.
exactly. We already have really high bills here in South Carolina. Like, we're not at the. I love the state. I was born in Florence. I've lived here my whole life, but we have ridiculously high bills, and we're not the most wealthy state in the nation. So why are we paying, like, in the top five for when it comes to the highest power bills, and like the top five when it comes to highest electricity rates? It's, yeah, you wouldn't expect people in, like, California and New York to have lower power bills than us, but that's way more like our high power bills are a unique outlier, and that's because of the way that power is generated here in South Carolina. Uh, this like the legislation that we're going to be showing up on Tuesday to fight against. It's essentially a blank check for the utilities. It allow them to make it easier for them to build new gas infrastructure. It'd make it easier for them to roll back oversight and make it easier for, like, honestly, even has like a corporate welfare for the gas industry component integrated in it. It's all over the place. It's a horrible bill, and it's kind of hard to understate all of the negatives that this type of legislation could unleash on South Carolina. And and the consequences will be even higher power bills and even more, like, pollution, even more being tied to the methane gas industry and its in its unpredictable rates. So, like, yeah, there's so much bad with this.
Thank
And
you, Paul. And Xavier, what's wrong with gasification plants? And the gas has to be pumped, and that means building more pipelines. And where some of the areas that these pipelines are going to be built, and what are some of the possible dangers when you're when you construct the pipelines through communities? You're a
Well,
policy guy. You know about these bills and laws and also environmental impacts, Xavier, right?
well, yeah, well, one of the main problems with the construction of gas plant, especially when you consider a blank check for a gas plant, I mean that could be one of the largest, gas infrastructures that we've seen, in the state and beyond. And one of the issues with that is they have to run a pipeline, separate from coal and other types of generation, especially cleaner zero emissions generation like wind and solar, even geothermal, hydro. With gas, you've got to run a pipeline, and we've seen, the vicious tactics of like eminent domain, especially you could say agriculture in South Carolina. Pipelines aggressively in coming across and disrupting folks' agriculture practices, but then also communities, most important. And those pipelines tend to come through communities, and there'll be pipeline expansions because the bigger the plant, you may need to expand the pipeline and get a bigger pipeline, and so that would come through those communities, or usually and historically, it come through communities of least resistance. Those are our environmental justice communities, communities of color, communities who lack the income and political representation to actually combat the pipeline. So they would expand and look to come through there, and then that's been the trend. And then overall, once there's a lot of jobs associated with construction of a gas plant, and the pipeline. But once it's constructed, there really aren't that many jobs. It takes way less people than other types of generation to actually run a gas plant once constructed. But then there's these other facets to dependency on gas, where we all know at the pump, gas prices can fluctuate up and down, and the volatility of gas is unpredictable. And there's a lot of market studies and reports showing that gas is going to be even more volatile as we go into the future. So there's also that dependency there, where if gas and the price of gas fluctuates, folks' energy bills could also fluctuate when compared to, like we always say, who's charging for rays of light coming from the sun. And the earth doesn't charge us for its wind cycles when it blows wind. So that's something that you have to think about, is those extractive processes. And then last but definitely not least, the methane emissions from the gas being transported, even from the source where there's fracking going on, which is a bad practice that is contributing to climate change. But then there's methane loss and emissions during the transport of this gas, and then at the actual burning and during the plant, there's methane releases, which contribute to the overall climate crisis. And so when we have these storms and things like that are historic climatic events, there's enough science to say that those methane emissions are definitely contributors to our overall case for the sake of the climate crisis.
Mm-hmm. So we're talking about expanding the industry where eminent domain means that for the good of all, that they may be taking people's property. It may have an impact on our food source. That's farms, agriculture. I'm just going to say what it is. And usually when pipelines are built, they go through Black and brown communities and tribal communities. And with the leaks, etc., that also creates environmental problems that can cause health problems as well. And so at VC Summer is where they tried to build those two nuclear plants in Fairfield County. And while people are still paying for those plants that never were completed, they're still paying higher rates for that. And that's why we no longer have SCE&G, South Carolina Electric and Gas, because it put them out of business, and that's how Dominion Energy came here. So let's talk about Tuesday a little more. So we have a bunch of organizations coming, and a lot of people will be testifying and commenting at the House of Representatives. But who really should be there? The people who are really going to be impacted the most. And we thank you guys for being there on the front lines for leading this fight. But the people who are going to be impacted the most are the citizens of this state, right? And future generations. So, um, you know, what does this mean? What do we need to do to really get people out?
I would say we would want to just encourage people to come out, like you said, to testify, to just, if they don't want to testify, just to attend the hearing and learn more about the process and some of the provisions in this bill. I think also just understanding that not only is this gas plant that we're talking about in this legislation one component, but understanding that like utilities do rate increases that affect rates. And so ultimately in demanding that more renewable energy is incorporated into the generation mix will help keep costs down. As Xavier just said, gas volatility is a big thing. And so we know here in the state, 100% of fuel costs gets passed on to ratepayers. So I think to the extent that we get people to show up and then tie all of this together to help them understand kind of how energy generation is being decided for the next generation. I think underscoring that is of utmost importance, in addition to encouraging people to come out to the hearing on Tuesday.
And when I say people, I like to break it down. We used to have a saying, let's get down to the real nitty gritty. For all of these small churches that are struggling, and there's loads of them, your electric bills are going up. For all those older people who worked on our farms and clean homes and that sort of stuff, their bills are going up. And I remember we were doing rehabbing houses once, and an elderly couple in Marion County, we had given them central heating and air. And I went to visit them one day, and this was back in the early 2000s. And I noticed they were burning wood in the wood burning stove. And I said, what's wrong? Is there something wrong with your system? And they told me, they said, Reverend, we thank you for putting the system in with money from the South Carolina Housing Trust Fund. They said, but we can't afford to pay that bill. And so folks like that, I want to break it down so folks need to realize small businesses, barbershops, churches, low income people, all of this is going to increase your bills. And for people already struggling, that single mom working 2 jobs, this is going to increase your bills. So I'm saying that, gentlemen, because I don't want people to think it's just organizations and it's just organizers who need to show up at this hearing. If you could get to Columbia on what date and what time, gentlemen, and where?
Yes, sir. It's going to be on Tuesday, February the 27th, I think at 2:30.
Right, at 2:30, and it's going to be at the Capitol, right? The state Capitol?
Yes, sir. I think now I could get you details on the exact location. I think it's going to be in the Black Building, if I'm remembering correctly, but please feel free somebody to jump in and correct me.
Is that right, gentlemen? I heard the Black Building also, right?
Yeah, it's going to be on the Black Building in room 403.
403, yeah. Right. And that's right there where the state capitol building is, right off of Pendleton. And this doesn't mean a quick increase. It means paying extra money for the rest of your life and for your children and your grandchildren, because we're talking, this isn't a small plan. We're talking about, what is it, guys? 10 years, 15 years?
It'd take at least about 8, 10 years to build, but we'd be paying for it for decades. And not only just the cost of construction, the cost of the fuel that it would need, the cost of the methane gas that's being piped in, the cost of the pipeline upgrades and the that they're going to be taking from landowners with eminent domain possibly. And so we're paying for the construction, we're paying for the fuel costs, we're paying for like the land that they're seizing, and we're paying with our climate that will be worsened by more fossil fuel infrastructure on the grid here in South Carolina. And they aren't just going to build it and change their mind in 10 years. It locks us into this fossil fuel infrastructure even longer for like 4 to 6 decades. So there's a
They're
lot
gonna
of
stick that
costs.
game.
And can
Yeah.
I add that
Well, sure, jump in.
and I hope my colleagues please correct me if I'm wrong, but we'll also ratepayers will also pay for this and bear the burden of these costs, whether they finish the project or not, like they did to the ratepayers during the VC summer when we spent $10 billion on a facility that we hadn't gotten 1 kilowatt of energy out of. So, these blank check policies are really, really bad when you think about consumers, communities, and ratepayers in the state of South Carolina.
And when you say black check, when a utility, when an electric company, a gas company, a solar company, whatever, when they want to raise their rates, they're supposed to go to the Public Service Commission, right? PSC, and
Correct.
get permission to raise their rates. But what you guys are saying with a blank check, there's nobody to check them. If they decide they want to raise the rate on the customers, they don't have to get approval. Is that what you're saying? When you
This
say blank check?
Well,
so
I think when the blank check phrase is coming from just essentially the project would be allowed to sidestep the permitting a process, but then would also, like my colleague said, would rack up construction costs and cost to maintain the facility, and then be passed on to ratepayers. So I think there are no upfront costs that have already been estimated and kind of on paper that give us an idea of how much it's going to cost, so we could analyze and come up with how much financial impact communities can expect to receive from it. So I think it's just the unknown of it as why we're saying that this is a blank check.
Mhm. And with the pipelines being built, am I right that some of these pipelines are going to go through the PD? That some of our listening audience right here in the PD, that some of their land might be seized, that the emissions from the methane, et cetera, might impact their communities. Am I right about that? This proposed plan?
the thing that because they haven't disclosed nearly anything about this plant, where like we only know roughly where it's going to be, and so we used a lot of like detective work to figure out the where of the plant. They haven't even disclosed also where the pipelines would run, but I'm from the PD, and I know that every single time there's been an expansion in the Low Country or in the PD, it's come at the cost of more pipelines in they're cutting through Effingham or cutting through Dillon, or it's like I can't say with absolute certainty exactly where these pipelines would run, but personally, it would shock me if it isn't going to be crisscrossing all through the PD like usual.
Right. I just jump in and say my part of my concern is there's a lot of uncertainty. So, like in Florida, we're building the electric vehicle battery manufacturing plant. And even though we're getting all these assurances, you know, cobalt, magnesium, nickel, all of those really dangerous chemicals that are used to build batteries, lithium, you know, we have a term called environmentally overburdened communities and vulnerable communities. Are we increasing the possibility, uh, Xavier, any of you can jump in, are we increasing the possibility of having more exposure to volatile chemicals that can impact our health and impact our environment? Is that a possibility?
I would say is if we put mechanisms in place that allow us to sidestep the environmental review and certification process. I think it's great that all these companies are coming to the state. I think, you know, that's all good, but I think setting things in place that allows for industries to come in, build facilities, not go through any type of environmental permitting, I think it does open up for the possibility of some of those substances that you've named, some of those pollutants to get into waterways, to get into the air, whatever the case may be. So I think that's why it's important to kind of stop, identify that setting that type of rhetoric, setting that type of precedent will make us less safe in the future by helping us be able to avoid those type of pollutants getting into our atmosphere, into our environment.
Okay, and Xavier, I think you used the term frack gas, and for our audience, you could go on YouTube. This is absolutely free. You could go on YouTube, and you're going to see some documentaries made by a wonderful guy. I got to meet him named Josh Fox, and these documentaries actually showed on HBO, but they're free to you. They're called Gaslands 1 and Gaslands 2, and they actually tell you how they get this gas, what we call frack gas or methane. And Xavier, I know you have some background with this. Why? Because I'm pretty sure you're the one who said frack gas. Why don't you tell folks what frack gas is and what's the manufacturing process, because it hurts those communities also, right?
Yeah, I think from the source of where you're getting gas from, and especially frack gas, I know folks may have heard about like the presence of earthquakes as a result of the process of fracking in Oklahoma. I know that was big a few years ago, and I think they've been able to mitigate some of that. But the same thing in Pennsylvania, and there's a specific type of rock for our geology folks called a shale that can and that specific type of rock formation called shale can contain oil in our kind of rock cycle and formations here in the United States. But by injecting other chemicals and explosives into those shales, they're able to force oil up out of the ground. But then as a result, we have seen increased things like earthquakes in those areas. Also, folks have an increased asthma, nosebleeds, because you've got all of these chemicals. Basically, when we say fossil fuels, old fossils that have turned into oil, coming out of the ground. But then we're also injecting benzenes, toluene, a lot of things with zine on the end of the name, which can be associated with carcinogens that cause cancer. We're injecting those things in there to force it out. And some of these blends are even proprietary, where we don't even know everything that they're injecting to force, oil out of the ground and out of those wells. So in the communities that they do those in are, again, communities, environmental justice communities, communities of color. And then I think another thing that I failed to mention that we've had some experience in is blast zones. There are, folks who are in jeopardy of having gas pipelines coming through their communities should also be aware and be asking for data on the blast zones. If there is an explosion, there have been explosions. I think one of the most vivid and maybe recent ones happened in Kentucky, but they had a blast zone of 600 feet from the pipeline, and that's what the federal government thought the blast zone was. Well, they had an explosion, and glass melted. Folks were harmed as further than 700 feet from the pipeline. So sometimes a blast can be even more than our data is predicting. So folks should be aware, and those are things that folks should ask about if they are in threat of having a pipeline. Is pipelines can explode, and if they do, I've never been around one, but from what I've seen, like glass in cars, whole windshields will melt. And then they said you only have about 5 to 20 seconds to respond or get out of the way if there's a blast. So that's another another hazard of being near, especially large industrial pipelines that are going to a plant versus pipelines that would serve more communities.
Mhm. Yeah, and that is a danger too. And years ago, they wanted to build a methane digester plant in the California community in Kentucky, and some of the folks that came together, people like Reverend Crosby, a lot of women. Oh my God, the women were awesome. They Bonnie Hudson and Reverend Snarden all came together to make sure that the California community wasn't put into harm, and they actually got the policymakers, and we use the term policymakers. Let's be clear. We're talking about those folks that we elect in office, our state house legislators, our state senators, who are the ones that can that have actually vote for this legislation, these bills. And so let me throw another question out there, because we all talk with our elected officials. How knowledgeable do you think, on average, our elected officials are when it comes to things like gasification plant? And that's another one too. If one of you guys don't mind explain, what exactly is a gasification plant? The one that they want to build somewhere near the proposed area, somewhere around Walterboro, with the pipelines coming out from there. What exactly is a gasification plant? And how knowledgeable do we think our elected officials are about these issues when they vote for bills like this?
So I can
Anyone
speak.
can jump in. Okay.
So I can speak some about just the general knowledgeability that I mean the level of knowledge around when it comes to the energy infrastructure that our legislators have. Here in South Carolina, we have part-time legislators. It's not a knock to them. It's they have usually have some form of day job. They make maybe like 11,000 a year or something like that. And because of that, they aren't usually all that much subject matter experts. Like it's technically a part-time job for them, even though it's an important responsibility, and they see it as important. But um, they also have to be able to provide for their families. I say that because when it comes to the knowledge that our legislators have, they might be an amazing real estate agent. They might be a great lawyer. They might be experts in a number of fields, but not many of them are experts in the ins and outs of energy policy, financing, and all the nitty-gritty that it comes to with our power utilities. That's why the regulators are important. That's why strong regulators and that's why the strong regulators are even more important, because they are those experts. Like the folks at the Office of Regulatory Staff or the Public Service Commission, they are those ones who should be able to take, massive tomes of information and break them down and make the right decision. So when we hear about those regulatory rollbacks, that's what's so alarming, because we know the utilities will slip stuff by. We know that they know how to make it confusing and convoluted and without route responsible, empowered regulators and the ability for regular citizens to hold them accountable without being barred from the process, it will be something that no one that really knows what's going on except for what we're being told by the utility lobbyists or public relation campaigns. And that doesn't cut it. This legislation would limit public input just in general in the decision-making process, making it even more challenging for ordinary people like us to raise our voice and suggest, for example, how the impact that these projects would have on communities. Like if this type of legislation goes through, it'd be even harder for, let's say, folks in the Kennedys area of a little bit north of Walterboro to fight against this plant. It for a variety of reasons. Like this legislation even removes the public advocate. This person is their whole job is to advocate for the public in front of the Public Service Commission. It would remove them from the process of being uh engaged in this work. So it sorry, the consumer advocate, that's the name, that's the term for the actual person who's supposed usually in these processes that helps look out for consumers as well. So I'm getting down a little bit of a rabbit hole about how bad this legislation is for with this regulatory rollback, but the reason that it like the reason that these regulations are important because we as the layperson or even our legislators don't have, a decade of industry experience in parsing through utility planning and figuring out where they are are bearing the lead essentially. Um, so that's at least what I can say about our legislators' knowledge. But one of the things we can do to help while fighting about this is just bringing it to the attentions of our legislators, letting our senators know exactly, our state senators, letting them know exactly how we feel about this. Because this bill is in the House now. It's in a House committee. It hasn't even been introduced to the full House. So we can let our House members know how much we oppose this, and we can let our senators know how much we oppose this. And there are a variety of other things that we can do, but we have to make sure that our opposition to this bill H 5118 is known, because yeah, our elected officials can't represent us if they don't know that this is something that we don't want.
Right. Thank you. Key word is represent us. Got it. Key word because we elect them to speak up for us and to support the communities. And so that's uh, legislative bill 5118. And so if you can't be there at the Black Building, at the state capitol on Tuesday at 10 a.m. Make sure Monday, bright and early, you pick up the phone, call that person that you went to the polls and voted for, that state house representative, that state senator, and let them know, hey, I listened to the Leo and Larry show, and did you know this, or did you know that? And I don't think we need to pass this legislation. Talk to your legislator when you see them in the supermarket, when you see them walking down the street. And it's not that they're bad guys, but just like what was said, they have to feed their families. They only make what, 11,000 a year? Oh my God, that's like that's not even hamburger flipping money, right? So let's help them out and let them know what's going on so that they can make the right decision. And so tell us some of the other organizations. Tell us something about your organization, Michael. Tell folks about Upstate for ever.
Yes, sir. So we do a lot of work with helping landowners conserve their property. Specifically, we also have programs in clean water and clean energy. I work in the clean energy program as the energy advocate, and we uh, help pretty much connect individuals with resources um, and help educate the community around the benefits of clean energy policies. So most recently, we have been doing outreach around energy efficiency program offerings from Duke Energy, as well as from the Inflation Reduction Act, or people may have heard it referred to as the IRA. So essentially, we just want to be a facilitator to the community, to the upstate region, helping them access resources, but also helping them really understand the intricacies of how land conservation, clean water, and clean energy all work together to help build and help maintain a thriving economy here in the upstate region.
Okay, thank you. And Paul and Xavier, you guys can talk about the Sierra Club and your work with the Sierra Club. And I'm also going to let our audience know that we have a PD group for the Sierra Club, and we meet monthly at Kingdom Living Temple on Irby Street. And so I want you to please, ma'am, please, sir, get in touch with us. Join the meeting, protect your environment, your home, your family. And so why don't you guys talk about the Sierra Club? That organization has been around for a while, right?
Oh, definitely. We've been around for over 130 years. We've been in South Carolina since some of our founders helped with the founding of the Congaree National Park. So, but in short, here, we're environmental advocacy group. Our mission is to enjoy, explore, and protect the earth, essentially. And what that looks like is getting involved in issues like this, where the energy future of South Carolina will be determined. It is getting involved in making and like coastal issues like nurdles and plastic bag bans, or it can be like sorry, there's like basically if there's an environmental issue, Sierra Club is involved in some way, shape, or form, nationally or at the state level. We're in most states. We my work mostly consists of work around the Beyond Coal campaign that we and stopping the growth of like fossil fuel infrastructure and shutting down coal plants and polluters like that and the industries that would support it. Because like if we don't do something, we won't have a recognizable planet. Not to sound hyperbolic, but yeah, this is a climate catastrophe. We're have like it used to snow in South Carolina, you know? It's like the environment's changing, so we need to change make it to make it more livable for future generations. So Xavier, he had to jump, but he was really instrumental in his work in the Georgetown area around helping usher the Winyah generation station to a just transition. And I'm working in the state to help shut down the rest of our coal plants and replace it with something cleaner and able to like support uh South Carolina for future generations, like wind or battery with wind with I mean solar with battery or wind power generation or just other carbon neutral generation techniques. But
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and thank you too for Michael for mentioning the Inflation Reduction Act. That is that consists of over $859 billion. And while we're looking at this gasification plant, there are billions of dollars available out there to help us um, produce our energy through what we call clean renewable energy, solar, wind, geothermal, using the heat out of the earth to create our energy. And none of the sun and the wind and the heat of the planet, none of those have harmful effects on our health or on our environment. And so it's really important. And we're going to be doing some work and doing some having some educational sessions because for our audience, there are tax credits and rebates out there right now. And guys, I'd like for you to talk about that, join in. where you can actually get tax credits or money back by producing cleaner, cheaper energy yourself, or reducing your energy costs by making your home more energy efficient, putting solar on your home. There's tax credits that will help you put a new, make it more affordable for you to put a new roof on your house, replace the doors, replace the windows, to put induction stoves in, which burn a less, it's less energy. Your energy bill would go down. And induction stoves work off of magnetism. You can cook food and you can actually, your baby can actually put their hand on the burner and won't get burned. Amazing new technology is out there that makes our environment, our community safer, and will lower your energy costs. So it's really important that you guys jump in and talk about that. This is real. We have alternative. We're not stuck with gasification plants. We're not stuck with pipelines. Those are not our only choices. There are other choices, and we need to be talking to our elected officials about doing more of that. Michael, you mentioned the IRA and the work that you do. You want to talk a little bit more about that and opportunities that people have?
Yes, sir. I think specifically what I've been focused on is, like you said, the IRA does have billions of dollars in funding for grant programs that offer rebate, not only grants, but rebates and other tax incentives for energy efficiency upgrades. Specifically, what I've been focused on is that there will be some consumer home rebate programs that will be administered through the state's energy office. So there are a few programs, specifically, there are two that are being formed. As last I heard, they have not completed like the application process and actually setting up how the program will be administered. But the home energy performance based whole home house rebates, I know that's a lot, but the home energy performance based whole house rebates, as well as the high efficiency electric home rebates program. Those would be two separate. It's a lot of verbiage there, but those will be two separate rebate programs that will be established by the South Carolina Energy Office. Hopefully later in the year, that will give rebates to households for energy efficiency retrofit. So that means any weatherization. Weatherization includes like installation, sealing airways, new windows, that type of things that will make your home conserve and save energy and make it more energy efficient. And then also there are some other programs that offer tax credits based on upgrading to Energy Star. I know most people are familiar with the Energy Star uh, label, which is the government-backed energy efficiency program. There are tax credits associated with like upgrading windows and doors and water heaters and adding installation to your home, even if upgrading your electric panel. So those types of things are available and will be coming out from the state energy office. So as we continue to get that information and continue to see those programs develop, we'll be sure to continue to help push out that information around the state so that families can access those benefits.
Thank you so much. You want to add anything about that, Paul?
Sure. So Michael did a really good job, but I'll just add there's a tool that the South Carolina Sierra Club partnered with a few other organizations in North Carolina to develop. It's a website called energyfundsforall.org, and it has a lot of really handy a lot of information. It's a toolkit that we developed to help folks understand what's going on with all of the opportunities to access funding for clean energy. That's and like weatherization. It covers renters, homeowners, landlords, nonprofits, local governments, tribal governments, and workforce development and labor. So if you have questions about the Inflation Reduction Act and what it means for any one of those groups, be it you, your friends, family, or organization, please use this toolkit. It's called energyfundsforall.org, and it will definitely get you going in the right direction.
Wow, that you know what that sounds like, gentlemen. That sounds like we need to, you guys know I love to organize the community. That sounds like we need to have a meeting and just open it up and invite people in the community to come out and learn how they can save money, how they can get rebates, how they can get tax credits, and fix their homes, repair their homes, upgrade their homes, and lower their energy costs, lower their gas bills, lower their electric bills. And I mean, I'm just gonna say, hey, if we pull something like that together, will you two guys be willing to come and present the folks in the community here in the PD area?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Keep me updated on that. I would be interested in participating.
Okay,
Definitely
great.
on my part.
Yes, okay, great, because we want to do that stuff. Also want to say this, because it's getting time for us to wrap it up. I told you guys this time goes by quickly, right? If we were at Club Shay Shay, we'd been a little looser because we had something to say about. Say what? Because I'm still a preacher. So we might have been sitting around puffing cigars and having a more in this conversation. But I want folks to know too that we will be leaving from Kingdom Living Temple Church, 705 South Irby Street on Tuesday. We have a bus, we have cars, and if you want to come and talk with your legislators, free ride to the state capitol with New Alpha Community Development Corporation, Whitney M. Slater Foundation, Kingdom Living Temple. We will take you right there to the event so that you can speak up and make sure that not only your energy bills, but the energy bills for those in the future, for many generations, are not skyrocketing and helping to keep people poor. And so all you need to do is to contact us, and we'll be leaving about okay, well, the hearing is at 2:30, and we'll be leaving the church at 11:30 at 705 South Irby Street. Some of you have already got calls, getting ready to put out some flyers and all that stuff. So bring your cars, bring your food, bring your snacks, and we're going to go there and let people know this is a democracy. That means rule of the people. Demo means people in Greek, and democracy means rule of. So we love our legislators. We appreciate the work that they do with the people's voice. Needs to and shall be heard. So we want to invite you, if you're interested in this and want to support having this legislation not passed, join us at Kingdom Living Temple, 705 South Irby Street, Tuesday at 11:30 a.m. And so we're running out of time, guys. And you want, I'll give you some contact info. We're running out of time now. So, Paul, Michael, why don't you tell folks how they can contact you for more information on the work that you do, protecting our communities, protecting our environment, and how they can find out how they can get some funds to help them upgrade their homes and lower their energy costs. So whichever one of you want to go first, just let our audience know how they can stay in touch with you.
Yes, sir. Well, my name is Michael Coleman again. You can reach me at M Coleman. That's MCOLEMAN at upstateforever.org. M Coleman at upstateforever.org. Thank you.
And once again, I'm Paul Black with Sierra Club, and you can reach me at paul.black@sierraclub.org. And once again, that website with some of the information I was mentioning was energyfundsforall.org. But yeah, thank you, Reverend Woodbury, for having us on, and I really appreciate you bringing us on to share this opportunity for advocacy next week.
Thank you so much, Reverend.
Yes, thank you guys for all the work that you do. And we work together. We're going to continue to work together so that when people hear our little state motto, smiling faces, beautiful, smiling faces, beautiful places, that will be true. And it won't be a place of misery and sorrow and suffering. And if you want to contact me, you can also always reach me by email at info@newalphacdc.com. Make sure that you visit our website, www.newalphacdc.com. And if you want to reach us by phone, please feel free to call me at the church that I am super blessed to continue to pastor. And that's Kingdom Living Temple, telephone number 843-799-0740. And so until next week, this time, if the Lord so wills, join us once again at the Leo and Larry Show, the show that shows you the places you need to go and the things that you need to know. You find out by listening to the Leo and Larry Show. God bless you and take care of one another.